This is the third video I've made now connected to the disorder that we've seen on our streets. Um, the latest is that there's a number of counter demonstrations across the country this evening, anti racism demonstrations and other connected counter demonstrations. Sunderland was quiet today, although Cafe Nero was closed. I mention that because it's usually open to 6 o'clock, so I imagine some businesses are closing early. But when I was in the city centre, I didn't see anything. I did see the aftermath of some of the trouble. A number of premises had the windows smashed, not the whole way in, but when it's kind of you could see the evidence that a missile's been projected at it. Um, I did overhear some women talking about when is the protest going to be, and quite honestly, I don't regard you know, people talking about protest in this context as being peaceful protest. In fact, they're talking about rioting. They're not going to say that, but I've seen very little evidence of so-called peaceful protest. Um, there were a few police officers around. There was supposed to be something going on in Millfield, which is one of Sunderland's inner suburbs, inner districts, I should say, this evening. So I don't know if there's been any trouble. I hope it's a turning point. I hope the worst is over. Um, I don't know if I mentioned this in the last video, but among the things that have been happening in Sunderland, two Filipino nurses were had their vehicle attacked. I don't know if they were in a taxi or if it was their own vehicle, but regardless, they felt terrified. They completed a shift and they were going home and they were in their vehicle. In North Yorkshire, white supremacists were stopping vehicles to see the ethnicity of those inside. In Middlesbrough, Asian families were forced from their homes. So one thing about all of this is unquestionably, there is a very ugly far right racist component to this, and I've seen a lot of people try to downplay that. They've tried to say, "Oh well, we don't condone the rioting, but it's not really racist." Wake up! That makes me angry because that sort of denialism doesn't help. Some of this is blatantly being not some of it, a good chunk of it has been blatantly racist in its nature because it's been specifically targeting, along with the police and businesses, it's been specifically targeting ethnic minority people. That's undeniable. Um, so I'm calling a spade a spade. The far right is the far right. Now, having said that, this is the Times, I should say, yesterday's Times. So some of the images here. That's going to fall apart. A few things to point out. The riots have been confined to England and Northern Ireland. So far, Wales and Scotland seem to have been spared any trouble. I don't know if we can read much into that or not, but all the riots have been in English towns and cities and in Belfast. I think Belfast has long had a racism problem. Um, and, it's no mystery that some of the loyalist groups in Northern Ireland have close ties to English uh, neo-nationalist groups. Is the term far right overused? In this context, I don't think it is because clearly the nature of a lot of these riots are influenced by the far right. Having said that, we have to be careful how we debate this because if anyone who has concerns about immigration is labelled far right, that would be lazy. Um, and certainly, I've seen some on the left who are quite arrogant about this, where they will just label anyone who doesn't see the world they do, the way they do, as far right. For example, they would regard all reform voters as far right. Now, that's clearly absurd. You can't just demonize 4 million people or whatever it was that got in the election, 4 or 5 million people. I don't like reform. I don't trust reform. But I really don't think that reform voters are fundamentally bad people. I think there's some rotten apples in there. I do. Like those who abuse Rishi Sunak. And I think there is. I think reform gets more than its fair share of racists attracted to it. But that doesn't mean that, everyone who supports reform is a racist. Now, Farage, I'm going to specifically address something because, you know, this is Farage's response to the rioting. Nigel Farage said he was appalled by Sunday's far-right violence against migrant hotels as he called for Parliament to be recalled to debate immigration. The Reform leader was speaking as a video from 2020 re-emerged of him claiming the residents might be ISIS terrorists, saying it's possible. On Sunday, rioters stormed hotels in Tamworth and Rotherham, started fires and attacked police with fireworks, planks and bottles. Graffiti daubed in one hotel read "FUCK Packies", that's verbatim, um, "Scum and Get Out of England". Video taken by a migrant in Rotherham and obtained by the Times showed a masked man threatening the residents of the hotel by drawing his finger across his throat. Police said the lives of residents inside were put at risk. Farage, 60, said in a statement yesterday, "I have been totally appalled by the levels of violence in the last couple of days. In the short term, we will quell the riots, but deeper long-term problems remain. These include the impression two-tier policing, a belief popular with the far right that ethnic minorities were policed more softly than white Britons." Well, this is an example of lazy use of the term far right. A lot of people think there's an inconsistency in policing. I think there is. Um, I'm not far right. I abhor the far right. I think it's wrong to say that if people have questions about how the police are lacking consistency, then they're somehow far right. That's absurd. And silencing people that way is ridiculous. In 2020, Farage posted videos in which he claimed to uncover a migrant hotel. In the video, he said, "We've got no idea who some of these people are. We've no idea whether some of them might be ISIS. It's possible." Farage's spokesman was approached for comment. Now, I think any party leader has a right to ask questions, but leaders have responsibility, and putting out speculation isn't necessarily helpful. One thing about Elon Musk, Musk, richest man in the world, joint richest with Jeff Bezos, has come in, waded into this, and said we're facing civil war. He's criticised Keir Starmer. He's promoted some of the arguments that have been behind this. Um, I don't think he's doing anything particularly helpful. I don't see how talking about civil war is going to help the situation. It's not civil war. It's serious social unrest. But I don't think getting into hyperbole helps. So far no one has died. There's been injuries. It's a very serious situation. But I think talking about civil war is just unhelpful. Um, and the thing about Elon Musk is I think he advocates a sort of Wild West attitude to the internet. His view is basically, well, as long as it's within the law, people can say whatever they want. But I think he goes a bit further than that. I think he basically has the attitude that people can say whatever they want with no personal accountability. Oh, it's free speech. I mean, what I find obscene is Musk was talking about Britain being like the Soviet Union because the police are taking action against incitement. Now, if someone is clearly inciting violence, there should be action taken against them. That's just common sense. How the hell is that being like the Soviet Union? So, this is why I have no time for Elon Musk sticking his nose into this and not helping anyone. He is allowing all sorts of components, all sorts of people on his social media platform to say whatever the hell they want, including spreading false information. So I don't think Musk is helping anyone. He has a lot of power and influence. And is he trying to calm tensions? No, he's fanning the flames, as I see it. He's not directly saying going out and riot, but I don't think he's helping either. Um, but the issue of two-tier policing, it can't be dismissed. I do think there is a question about how the police approach things. There has been amongst these riots also images of Islamists shouting Allahu Akbar. There'll be some crossover with what's happening in Israel and Gaza, but some of them have been armed. And this isn't just a case of protecting mosques. They're going beyond that. They're intimidating people as well. They're thugs. They also need to be arrested. And I'd like to see some of the left wing counter demonstrators acknowledge that there is also a problem there. Now, in these riots, I think the bulk of it has been from the far right. You know, if you look at most of the riots across the country, it isn't Islamists attacking people, it's um, white supremacists, far right activists, blood and soil nationalists. And don't tell me that, oh, they're just angry people. They're thugs, right? And they are absolutely targeting minorities. There's no question about it. That is racist by definition. I don't see the point of being kind of, oh, well, we can't call them racist. It's not all of them, blah blah blah. Let's just call it what it is. Um, but what I don't want to see coming out of this, well, there's a few things I want to say. Firstly, the thing about Farage, right, about his position. Yeah, he's condemned it, but I've always taken the view that anyone can make a blanket condemnation of violence, and that's fine. It's better than not doing it. But that's still different from specifically condemning the individuals involved. Now, he said he's appalled by the violence, and he laid out this 3 point plan to deal with it, and it was all around the issue of immigration. How about cracking down hard on yobs who are attacking people? Why is that not part of his plan? He's saying like the way to deal with this is to sort out the immigration issue. Well, yeah, it's an issue. It has to be addressed, and people are angry about that. People are concerned about that, and so on. But in terms of specifically these riots, I think Farage's response has been pretty weak. He's condemned it, but I don't think that's enough, frankly. You know, it's not enough to say, well, oh, they're angry about immigration, so we have to focus on that. Let's deal with that. But this is happening right now. People are being terrorized right now. I want to see Farage or Tice come out and specifically say, I support the police in cracking down on racist thugs. Why does Farage find it hard to condemn these people directly? He says he's appalled by violence. Good. But I think he finds it hard to condemn these people directly. Very likely because some of them will be some of his base support. Again, I'm not saying everyone in reform, but I think you'd be pretty naive if you say, oh, it's just a very, very small minority. No, reform attracts more than its share of racists. That's obvious from some of the stuff that was coming out during the general election directed at Rishi Sunak. I think reform attracts racists. Farage himself has admitted that former BNP people have been attracted to reform, and he has done more supposedly to tackle the far right than anyone, which I think is a joke. But the question is, why is it that former BNP people and others are attracted to reform? Why? If it's a supposedly moderate party. Um, I will say this: I've no time for the likes of Hope Not Hate, and incidentally, one of the spokespeople of Hope Not Hate was spreading false information himself. He falsely claimed that Muslim women were getting threats of acid in their face by the far right. That was false. There was no evidence for that. Now, if incitement is deemed to be spreading false information, then anyone doing that should be held accountable. If they're doing that publicly and they're recklessly spreading information that is not accurate. Um, I mentioned that I took part in a peace rally in Sunderland. Now, that was organised by churches. If it had been organised by Hope Not Hate, I probably wouldn't have turned up because I don't trust Hope Not Hate. Hope Not Hate has a record of calling out racists and fascists in the far right. They're utterly, utterly silent when it comes to intolerant Islamists. Um, the way I feel about this right now is I'm utterly, utterly disgusted by the racist thuggery that we've seen, and I think it has to be tackled. And I'm pleased that there's been swift justice. I'll come to that in a minute, but I think it would be wrong and naive to think that's the only sort of that we have in this country. I think there is Islamist extremism, and I don't think that should be swept under the carpet because on this occasion it happens to be the far right. We've had many, many examples in this country of that sort of ugly Islamist intolerance directed against Jews, directed against anyone deemed to criticise Islam. Look at the teacher that was forced into hiding in West Yorkshire. I still think that many police forces are not being consistent with this. Now, I support individual officers. I think they're under enormous pressure at the moment. Um, and I've tried to be a good citizen. I actually spoke to officers earlier with what I'd overheard, just because I thought it might be helpful if they probably knew about it anyway. But so I've sympathy for individual officers in this situation. They're going to be working long, long shifts. They're not going to be getting much rest. They're going to be personally targeted. They're going to be exhausted. So I do have sympathy for individual officers, and I support them 100%. I think every political leader needs to be supporting the police right now to retain order. But that doesn't mean that there aren't questions to ask of the police. And if they just shirk this off, I mean, Starmer tried to shirk it off. He said two-tier policing is a non-issue. That's not accurate. There is legitimate concerns about the consistency of policing. And if this Labour government wants to turn a blind eye to some of the issues that people are angry about, it will fuel more unrest. Now, I want to be clear on this point. I don't think there's any excuse for rioting. So I don't really have much sympathy with this idea. Oh, well, they're angry. That explains it. It might explain it, but it can't excuse it. Like I say, I'm angry about a lot of things. Don't go out and set a stranger's car on fire. And also, I don't really accept that, someone's angry about the cost of living crisis or they're disillusioned with the government or small boats. So, oh, well, they go out and just physically attack the nearest non-white person. It's that mentality must not be condoned, and there must be tough penalties for that because otherwise you have it taking hold. Now, on the issue of this fast track justice, I support it. I think it's welcome, but people will say, "Well, wait a second. There was supposedly a prison overcrowding crisis. Why is it there's suddenly 500 places?" And people have automatically got custodial sentences. Yet, if you're a victim of burglary or other crimes, then you have to wait out the process. Um, it's valid to ask about that. I mean, I'm pleased that there's been swift justice. I think there should be, particularly for some of the more serious offences. I think custodial sentencing is absolutely justified for violent assault. But why, again, consistency? Um, So, I'm not going to say I'm in the middle with this. I think that the far right violence that we've seen is disgusting. The racism that we've seen is disgusting. But I will say to those on the left who say that the problem is to deal with the far right and then everything goes away. Well, that's dealing with part of the problem. But if you're going to ignore the issues that people feel frustrated about, like illegal immigration, um, like perceived double standards in policing, like Islamists seemingly getting away with their extremism. It's it's not going to help anyone. So I'm on the side of anyone who calls out all extremism. Today I disconnected from someone because her attitude was, and she's a minority herself, but her attitude was all the far right things just completely exaggerated and there's basically no problem. Oh, a few of them are maybe racist, but that's it. I've no time for that sort of downplaying um, because I think it doesn't help anyone. To me, saying that there's no problem with the far right is the same as some Muslims claiming that there's no problem with Islamism. There is a problem with Islamism and there is a problem with the far right. And if someone is getting into blood and soil nationalism, saying that it's legitimate to attack all foreigners, getting mobs outside hotels of people, I'm calling it what it is. The issue about the hotels, again, it taps into the wider issue of immigration, but I'm never going to support mob mentality. You get people in those hotels, some of them may well be questionable people, but there may also be people in there who are genuine refugees. Um, in the sense that they've legitimately fled persecution, and now they get a mob of racists wanting their blood. It's just, it's all uncivilized, it's backward. I have no time for it. Um, but the issue of consistency is extremely important, and I don't think Farage is wrong to ask questions about some of this. I don't think anyone is wrong to ask questions about that. So the left's response to this, groups like Hope Not Hate and so on, fine, you're opposing racism. I'm with you. I oppose racism. I want racist folks to face justice. But let's not pretend that that is the only extremism in this country. And let's not pretend all British Muslims are fully integrated and peaceful people. They're not. They're absolutely not. So um, I think that there's dishonesty coming from both sides. But I would say that with these specific riots, on this occasion, it has been predominantly the far right. On other occasions, where we've seen terrorist atrocities, that is absolutely at the hands of Islamists. But these riots in the summer of 2024 have been predominantly stoked up by the far right. And you're going to get, some counter riots that will involve Islamists as well. So the police need to be consistent and crack down hard on them too. I don't think the police are entirely consistent. I have sympathy with them as individuals, but I do think that there's legitimate questions to ask. And I will say this, if police chiefs and this Labour government just try and dismiss those concerns and try to sweep them under the carpet, it's not going to help anyone. So that's my take on all of this. I'm pleased that there's been swift justice, but coming out of this, if I hope the worst is over, but coming out of it, um, there has to be an understanding of why people are angry. Um, Thugs need to be condemned, right? That's a given. But I don't think it's right to just smear, for example, all reform voters as racist. I don't think that's the case at all. I personally know reform voters; they're decent people. I don't trust reform personally because of their stance on foreign policy. I do not trust Farage at all. I don't like Nigel Farage. There was a time I sort of thought, well, he may be on something. He may have good points. I think he's a, I think he's a cynical populist who isn't really interested in leadership. Farage is a professional protester. I don't think he's really a leader. He said, by the way, after the Trump assassination attempt, that if he wasn't in Clacton, he would be at that rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. Well, what the hell would he be doing at a rally in another country if he is so patriotic that he wants to campaign here? It's one of my many. I mean, if that was any other MP or someone looking for office and they were getting involved in rallies in other countries, reform people would say, "What are they doing there? Aren't they being patriotic?" But Farage is Trump's poodle, so he just yeah. That's I mention that because Farage has come into this debate, and I'm talking about my views of Nigel Farage as a leader. I'm not impressed. I think Farage is a professional protester. I don't think he takes a great deal of responsibility as a leader. And yes, he's condemned the riots in broad terms, but he has not condemned the rioters specifically, and I think he should. I think he should unequivocally say, I support the police in tackling these racist thugs. And then, along with Islam is fine. But he seems to find it hard to do that. He's just said he's appalled by the violence. Not good enough. He has to go further than that, as all leaders should.